males incarcerated in 2013. African American males accounted for 37% of those incarcerated, despite only making up 13% of the male population. In fact, there are more African American men incarcerated in the U.S. than the total prison populations in India, Argentina, Canada, Lebanon, Japan, Germany, Finland, Israel, and England combined. It was said by President Obama that you have young men of color in many communities who are more likely to end up in jail or in the criminal justice system than they are in a good job or in college. Those statistics show that there are about 1.4 million black men enrolled in higher education. There are still 745,000 behind bars, with another large sum on probation and parole, and that is completely unacceptable. It was said by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton in her first major speech of her presidential campaign that we have to come to terms with some hard truths about race and justice in America and called for an end to the era of mass incarceration. Senator Bernie Sanders, another presidential candidate, stated, "Scapegoating minorities is not going to solve the problems facing our country. We need to reform a very broken criminal justice system." Some have the false notion that there is not a race problem within the criminal justice system, but they are sadly mistaken. If there was not a race problem, then why are blacks imprisoned at 6 times the rate of whites? If there is not a race problem, then why are there 5 times as many whites using drugs as African Americans, yet African Americans are sent to prison for drug offenses at 10 times the rate of whites? If it is not a race problem, then why are African Americans 3 times more likely to be searched at traffic stops than whites? If it is not a race problem, then why do African Americans represent 12% of the total population of drug users, but account for 38% of those arrested for drug offenses, and 59% of those in state prison for a drug offense? African Americans serve virtually as much time in prison for a drug offense as whites do for a violent offense. It was said by Representative William Lacey Clay of Missouri, "It is apparent, if you go back through our history, that the grand juries of the criminal justice system do not value black lives. African American men are far more likely to be stopped and searched by police, charged with crimes, and sentenced to longer prison terms than white men found guilty of the same offenses. It is time that we take heed to the words of President Obama and realize that racism, we are not cured of it. And it's not just a matter of it not being polite to say nigger in public. The involvement of racism in America has transformed to where blacks face a new type of enslavement, imprisonment. There must be changes made in the criminal justice system because the current corrupt system cannot continue. Lawmakers must propose legislation to combat the injustice within the system. There must be legislation passed that reduces the prison entries for nonviolent offenders who account for most of the prison population. There must be legislation passed that eliminates mandatory minimum sentences for low-level drug offenses. There must be legislation passed that requires proper training of officers when encountering those of different racial or ethnic backgrounds. And there must be legislation passed providing rehabilitation services for those addicted so that they can become clean and stop the reoccurring cycle of returning to prison for the same offense. Making these changes not only create a more just system, but also one that is a lot more cost efficient, with the United States currently spending $51 billion for the war on drugs. Pioneers in Congress, such as Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas, and many more are fighting to propose legislation that can make a difference, but support is needed. Individuals, especially those of the Black community, must come together and work to make a difference. It was said by the rapper 2 Chainz. I encourage everyone to pay attention to the issues that matter to you. From jobs in the economy, to education in our schools, to criminal justice reform. Whatever it is that you care about, make sure you use your voice. As Americans, we have to realize that we have a voice and we should use it to the best of our ability. Within the Black community, we portray the efforts of the past if we fail to push back against bigotry in all its forms. There's much work that is being done, but there is much more to do and much more support needed to make a change. I believe that so many Americans are stagnant in making a difference because they have the belief that the dream envisioned by brother Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has been achieved. They are wrong. Many are supportive of the Black Lives Matter movement. But what good is posting a hashtag when you're not even a registered voter? We have to be strong on all fronts.
Yes, sir.
We have to organize and protest injustices.
That's right.
We have to create movements such as Black Lives Matter and draw national attention to the issues my brothers struggle with every day.
Talk, Jay.
And if we do that, one day, maybe one day, we can finally break the chains of slavery placed on our ancestors and collect glory because the war we've been fighting since coming to America has finally been won.